Welcome to Past People. To support my channel, please consider subscribing. The Death Mask of Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, a monarch who held sway over Britain for numerous decades, found herself in a state of semi-consciousness within her chambers at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. Her passing occurred at the age of 81 on the 22nd of January 1901, following a prolonged period of illness. During her reign, Queen Victoria presided over significant transformations within her nation. Her sudden demise sent shockwaves through the royal family, leaving them bewildered and unprepared. With no one among the living having prior experience in planning a royal funeral, questions arose regarding the appropriate protocols. For some time leading up to her death, Queen Victoria had been in mourning after the untimely passing of her husband, Prince Albert. However, in the immediate aftermath of her demise, uncertainty shrouded the late Queen's wishes. While she had expressed her desires for what should not occur after her passing, one wish was disregarded. Kaiser Wilhelm II insisted on creating a death mask of Queen Victoria, contrary to her wishes. But what is the story behind the haunting death mask of Queen Victoria? The year 1900 was a year Queen Victoria considered her most dreadful. The Boer War had embroiled Britain in Africa, causing her great anxiety. Additionally, her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, was shot by a young protester while travelling through Belgium. Meanwhile, her eldest daughter Vicky, the Dowager Empress of Germany, had received a dire diagnosis of aggressive breast cancer. Vicky's pain, while inside a German castle, deepened Victoria's sorrow. Tragedy continued to strike in August 1900 when Victoria's beloved son Alfred, the Duke of Edinburgh, succumbed to throat cancer, worsened by heavy smoking. In her diary, Victoria mournfully noted, "Oh God, my poor darling Affy, gone too. My third grown-up child. It is hard at 81. More heartache followed with the passing of her cherished grandson, Prince Christian Victor, the son of Princess Helena. He fell victim to fever while serving with the British Army in South Africa, and Victoria's closest friends were also departing, leaving her in a state of profound grief. Physically frail, Victoria had lost a substantial amount of weight due to her diminished appetite and was confined to a wheelchair. She experienced bouts of confusion, having reigned for so long that the world around her seemed unrecognizable. In her diary, she lamented the beginning of another year, marked by her weakness and poor health, entering it with sadness. As Victoria's health deteriorated, she resided within her beloved Osborne House. Her declining condition prompted the summoning of members of the royal family to her bedside. The family grappled with the reality of her impending passing, unable to accept that Queen Victoria was approaching her final days, and the doctors faced the difficult task of managing their emotional turmoil. She was in a state of delirium, but Princess Helena and Beatrice couldn't come to terms with the fact that their mother was nearing the end of her life. They made an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy. However, some members of the royal family regarded the summons to Osborne House as an inconvenience. Even Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Victoria's grandson, had to cancel elaborate celebrations to rush to the Isle of Wight. He understood the gravity of the situation. While British newspapers and tabloids caught wind of the Queen's illness, inside Osborne House, Victoria's condition was deteriorating rapidly. There were moments when she would briefly rally and express her desire to continue living, stating, "I would like to live a little longer, as I have a few things to settle." However, starting from the 17th of January 1901, Queen Victoria suffered a series of severe strokes, prompting the summoning of more members of the royal family. Government affairs came to a standstill as Queen Victoria was unable to fulfill her duties. Inside Osborne House, there was a sizable gathering of guests, and in Victoria's bedroom, the Bishop of Winchester and another priest were present to sing hymns and offer prayers. Kaiser Wilhelm II remained at her side for hours. Although her doctors provided reassurance, Victoria's condition was distressing for the royal family, and tears were shed by everyone present. Subsequently, each son, daughter, and grandchild had the opportunity to bid the Queen farewell one last time. On the evening of the 22nd of January 1901, at 6:30, Queen Victoria passed away at the age of 81 in her bedroom at Osborne House. The news of her death spread before the new King Edward VII was formally accepted the crown, quickly reaching around the world, with newspapers publishing special editions. The bells of St. Paul's Cathedral tolled throughout London, and people dressed in black with shop windows draped in mourning cloth. Panic gripped the royal family as they grappled with the daunting task of planning a full military state funeral. Victoria had instructed her doctors to place several secret items inside her coffin, but one explicit instruction that she left for her death was her refusal to be embalmed and her aversion to having a death mask cast of her face in her final moments. The embalming process could have preserved her remains for an extended period, but death masks were a customary practice for monarchs and prominent European figures. Victoria, however, had a genuine distaste for death masks and their tradition. She wanted her subjects to remember her as the powerful Empress of India, not as a frail, suffering, elderly woman. Despite the complications surrounding the funeral planning and the disputes among royal officials, Kaiser Wilhelm II took advantage of the situation and ordered a death mask to be made of his grandmother. The Earl Marshal and Lord Chamberlain engaged in disputes over who would oversee the arrangements. The Earl Marshal was responsible for organising royal ceremonies and processions, while the Chamberlain was in charge of the royal household. The question of authority remained unresolved among them, aggravated by the King's household refusing to assume responsibility until after Queen Victoria's burial. An urgent accession council convened, and the Lord Mayor had to be excluded, resulting in a chaotic situation. Historically, death masks were created immediately after a person's passing, simplifying the task for those crafting effigies and tombs. However, as previously mentioned, Victoria adamantly opposed having one. Nevertheless, some time following her death, while still at Osborne House, Kaiser Wilhelm II ordered a death mask be cast of her face. This likely occurred in the immediate aftermath of her passing, just before she was placed in the coffin, alongside the requested artefacts. The decision to cast the death mask contrary to Victoria's wishes deeply upset many royal family members, who perceived it as a violation of her remains and wishes by the influential Kaiser Wilhelm II. The mask crafted by the royal physicians portrays an unflattering and sickly image of the Queen. Her tightly closed eyes and pursed lips are a stark departure from how she would have wanted to be remembered. The Kaiser's motives for ordering this casting remained uncertain, and perhaps he intended to take it back to Germany as a means of commemorating his grandmother, or he may have done so to provoke his relatives, as he would in the years leading up to the First World War. Chaos persisted in the preparation for the Queen's funeral. The royal undertaker forgot the coffin when he arrived on the Isle of Wight, which meant a local carpenter had to hastily construct the box for her burial. The funeral procession was an immense scale, with her coffin crossing the Solent, flanked by battleships and the Royal Navy's finest vessels, firing their guns as a small yacht, the Alberta, passed by carrying the Queen's remains. Ultimately, Queen Victoria was laid to rest at St. George's Chapel inside Windsor Castle. Even the funeral did not escape its own mishaps. The front of the procession began marching too early and couldn't be halted. Sailors had to manually drag the gun carriage towards the chapel. The service itself proceeded without chaos, but 2 archbishops arrived an hour ahead of schedule, and guests were practically coerced to vacate their seats to create the illusion of a fuller church. Queen Victoria's death mask remains a haunting and startling depiction of the Queen in her final moments. For someone who had reigned for such an extended period and overseen significant change, she had expressively wished not to be remembered with a plaster cast of her face in her dying moments. Nonetheless, Kaiser Wilhelm's request for the mask was granted, despite the disapproval and shock that it caused among many royals. Victoria, known for her concern about her image, would have been adamant about not being remembered in this manner. Thanks for watching, and please support my channel by subscribing.